Hello and welcome back to the True Crime Guys podcast. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Michael.
What's up, people? How we doing? How's the quarantine life?
And people are probably going stir crazy about now. But I'm not, though. I'm liking it. I'm actually liking quarantine life. It's not so bad.
You Snapchat me all day from your farm. You know, you got the right setup to be living in quarantine.
Yeah,
You're out
I don't
on the
feel
farm
closed in. Yeah, I feel like actually, this is weird, but I think this quarantine has actually given me a springboard into the life that I was kind of working for, because I can't work, so I've kind of had to plan for this sort of life, you know, like a life where I'm kind of cultivating our own food and working for myself, and it's actually been quite the springboard. And then, you know, we're supposed to get these stimulus checks. I'm like, hey, this is actually working in my favor. Like, I'm sorry, that is so insensitive. This is a lot of horrible things going on, but I'm just saying. I think a lot of people are getting a lot of shit done at home.
Yeah, and we're all, I mean, all we can do is live our own lives, you know. It's like, I feel bad at times because the situation I'm in at work is like half my department is at home getting paid. People that have less seniority than me.
Right.
And I'm very, very frustrated by it. I don't understand why I'm here and they're not, and they're getting paid and I'm doing all this bull crap and they're riding my ass just like normal.
Right.
But at the same time, people say, well, like, you're lucky to have a job. And it's like, yeah, but I got to live my experience. I've been here 14 years. I feel like I've earned the right to be at home. If other people have been here for 1 or 2 years, have earned the right to be home. What the hell is going on here? Like, why are we not splitting the load? What's, you know, they could do, just because, things could be worse. That doesn't mean that things couldn't be better too. You know what I mean? Like, management could have done a better job and all that. It's a long story, but.
Right. Dude, I'm sure a lot of people can agree with your work frustrations because, like you said, half of Americans are still working. Everybody, half of us are still got to get shit done. Like, day in, day out. Monday is still Monday. You know what I mean? For a lot of people.
Yeah, and working in the field, good luck finding a bathroom. Like, it's a nightmare. There's a lot of things that really suck. Like,
stores are closed.
I'm happy to be still working, and I'm happy to be getting paid. You know, like I said, but you know, there's still definitely things that are frustrating about it. My wife's out of work right now too. You know, her office closed down. So, yeah, things are interesting. But yeah, it definitely seems like for you, this kind of did. I got that sense that this kind of gave you that nudge toward the life you wanted, where you wanted to podcast for a living / live on a homestead type of thing, where living a life of modest means and not answering to anybody and having your own schedule and all that. And I respect that, and I think that's cool that this kind of gave you that little nudge that you needed.
Dude. It really excites my heart that you know me so well. You have a really good grasp on who I am. We're every day, I think we're becoming better friends.
Yeah, buddy. I've never heard that expression, but I like it. It excites my heart.
It excites my heart, man.
That's a T-shirt.
It may be this Bang energy drink I just drank, but I mean, I'm pretty sure
that's exciting your heart, all right.
Yeah.
Bang energy. You know what else excites the heart? Moida.
Moida, it does, man.
Shall we dive in?
Rating.
Shall we dive into another lesser-known, obscure serial killer? Those are my favorites. I think those are like fan favorites, ones where it's like, I've never even heard of this guy. How have I never heard of this serial killer? I call him Ed Kemper Light. There's so many similarities. Many similarities to Ed Kemper. He's a bigger guy. He's not quite Ed Kemper big. You know, Ed Kemper was like 6'9" or something.
Yeah,
but
he was a
this
giant.
guy was over 6 foot, 240 pounds. Well, once he was behind bars, he was pretty skinny during his killing days.
Yeah,
but
he was like 165, 170. I mean, that's pretty light, especially if you're over 6 foot. That's pretty light.
You know what? Ed Kemper would have ate him for lunch, really, when you think about it. But he has the same look and the same cadence to the way he talks. Once he was arrested, he really went into analyzing his own psychology, which I found quite interesting, and that's very Ed Kemperish. He did a lot of interviews, and their book that I used for this dives into a lot of his psychology, because a woman became kind of friends with him and was friends with, like, corresponding with him for a decade while he was on death row. So it's a pretty fascinating case.
And you believe this is all due to his narcissism, not the actually wanting to know what his issue is.
Yeah, right? I think almost everything he did was calculated, and he was also hot and cold. Like, he contradicted himself constantly. It seemed like whatever benefited him, he would say in the moment. You know, it was just. We'll get into it.
Take. I'm gonna keep that in my mind as we're going through the story now, because I didn't have that take beforehand. So I'm gonna keep that into consideration. All right, cool. Let's start this thing off, dude.
Let's get into it.
some reason with me, sexuality and violence have fused together. Sexuality, violence, fused together. When I attacked, I don't believe I was in control. I don't think I could have stopped. Reason I say that is because there's a very clear point to me after she was dead when I was feeling, well, I didn't really feel anything. I mean, I knew what was going on and I saw what was going on, but it was more like watching an old film that we used to see as kids in the high school. You know, I mean, in elementary school, they've been played so many times, they're all spliced, and they'd be going along and then jump. I'm not saying I wasn't there, was a multi-personality or any of that kind of crap. I was there and I did it, but I wasn't 100% there.
There's souls in society, they're broken inside, you see, worse than you and me could ever be. They seem to lack the empathy, like a sociopath, you see, not like you and me. Maybe they should be quarantined. Ha!
And after they were dead, I remember the very first feeling I had was my heart was really pounding. I mean, it was really pounding. The second feeling I had was that my hands hurt from where I had strangled them. I always manually strangled them. And then the third feeling I had was fear.
Scary how normal they look, like a character straight from a book. They seem familiar to me. That scares the shit out of me.
When I was younger, I started out with fantasies that were very, well, they weren't violent. They were, I don't know how normal they were, but they weren't violent type fantasies. Mainly, I guess the earliest ones I can remember is I would kidnap women and take them to my safe place. And then they would fall in love with me and not want to leave. James Bond, Superman type things. Then when I got to college, somehow these started degrading, going into more violent fantasies. That's when my rape fantasies first started, was when I was in college. I started following women home, and I would get a thrill by them knowing that I was following them, that they would be scared, and you know that gave me a thrill. And then it got to the point where I actually raped someone at Cornell, and then the next person I actually raped and killed.
There are souls in society, they're broken inside, you see, worse than you and me could ever be. They seem to lack the empathy, like a sociopath, you see, not like you and me. Maybe they should be quarantined. Ha 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 ha.
All right. Our case this week is a guy by the name of Michael Bruce Ross. Most likely you've never heard of him. He got the name of the roadside strangler on a whim. Supposedly some reporter in a diner kind of just came up with this shit.
Mm-hmm. He did strangle someone roadside, to be fair.
Several people roadside, really. I mean, it does fit. It does fit. It just doesn't really fully encapsulate him. I don't know. It's not quite enough.
It sounds too animalistic for him. He's way more calculated than that.
And I think you could have played on the chicken farmer thing. You could have used something like that. You know, it could have gone with the Eggman or the chicken farm murderer, something. I don't know. That's not great, but
the Eggman.
We can work with chickens. He grew up on a chicken farm. Actually, during a lot of his killing, he was still working on a chicken farm that was owned by his family. So
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people kill chickens and it end up killing people.
True.
You know.
No, I'm not saying that he killed people because he killed chickens. I'm just saying
that
he
just
could have
occurred
played
to
as
me.
far as his name.
That just occurred to me. I guess I just took offense to that. I guess I just thought you were making that assumption so early in this program about murderers.
That, you know what? The links were made when you study this case. A lot of people try to say because he had to snap chicken necks, that all of a sudden he was just going to start killing women.
Nope. Don't think that's how it works.
It's not that simple. I think it had a lot more to do with the mommy issues, and that's another Kemper similarity there. A lot of mommy issues in this one.
Yeah, and the horrible childhood as well, as far as
Yes.
the possible abuse, whatnot.
Also intelligence. Very intelligent guy. He was a grad of Cornell and actually a student assistant. So he's one of those dudes that grades your papers, one of the teacher's kiss asses.
Oh, God. One of those guys.
Yeah.
He would be
Yeah.
one of those guys.
He was, totally. He was a kiss ass all through high school, middle school, and
Yeah.
even into college.
I get that. School's so fun because I'm good at it. Fuck off.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Get this guy out of here.
All right, so let's dive into it. The book that I used to study this case was called Man in the Monster by Martha Elliot. Very good book. It's available in Audible form. I'll give you some excerpts from it.
Oh, please do.
Some quotes from the book just to get you a little bit of sense of where this book came from. This is a quote from Martha. "No one in her right mind invites a serial killer into her life. Who would want to know that kind of evil? For more than a decade, this is exactly what I did. I never imagined that I would consider someone like Michael Ross, a convicted serial rapist and murderer, a close friend. But from 1995 until his death by lethal injection in 2005, that is exactly what I did and what he became to me."
Wow.
So that's what this book is about, is her relationship with Michael Bruce Ross. And also it dives into, obviously, not just her relationship with him, but also the different deeds that he did, the heinous crimes, and his time behind bars. He was on death row for 18 years, I believe. And so there's a lot of time where he was sitting around writing. He actually was a successful writer behind bars. He was making money as selling like articles to different magazines and whatnot. A lot of them were religious ones. He was selling like anti-death penalty articles for religious means and all this stuff.
Oh,
But,
okay.
yeah.
I didn't know he was selling the articles. I know he was writing a lot in prison.
Yeah,
And he had quite
he was
the
making-
setup on death row.
He was making money that he could use for commissary and stuff to buy things from behind bars by selling articles.
Do you think those guys that make money in prison can then in turn pay off guards for more flexibility, you know what I mean, more goods and stuff like that? You think
Oh,
that
of
works?
course.
So that's probably how
Right.
he got extra cells and stuff. Because I saw one interview where he had like a cell for storage, and then he had his own cell.
Yeah, all his books were in a cell adjacent to his.
I mean, his cell looked like a living room with bars in front of it. I
Yeah.
mean, it really didn't look that bad to me.
You know what? Actually, his cell for being on death row, though. I
Way
mean,
too
maybe
good for
because
him.
it was. Yeah, well, no, because it was the '90s. But I've seen some more recent footage of death row, and their cells are way bigger than what he had. Like,
Really?
yeah, I was watching some just random crap on YouTube. It was one of those National Geographic specials on death row inmates or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a probably 600-700 square foot fucking cell with everything you could imagine. Like, it looked like a dream. Like, you don't have to deal with other inmates. You know, these people had the setup, you know, except for the part where your death is scheduled. But a lot of times those get put off and put off and put off, as we've seen with Randy Kraft.
It's not as big of
So-
an inconvenience as you might think.
Right. I think I would take death row for 20 years as opposed to being Gen Pop, you know, and worried about getting shanked every day and dealing with like a 6x9 cell or whatever they have.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, you do a smaller crime and you get punished more, but for a lesser time.
Yeah.
And then
one
I
thing that
guess
sucked about his cell, though, particularly, was that he was literally the last cell before the death room. Essentially, he could turn his head out of his cell and see where he was going to die. That's kind of creepy.
Oh, good though. I mean, good.
Yeah.
He did some horrible
Here's
things,
another-
man.
Yeah, here's another quote from the book from the author Martha Elliot. "Michael Ross was my partner in this investigation. He opened up his life to me so that together we might tell his story. I believe he worked with me for so many years as kind of an atonement for what he had done. His life is full of contradictions. He was a moral man who committed heinously immoral acts, a man capable of great bravery who was also cowardly, an intelligent man whose stubbornness defied reason. All of these facets dwelled within this man. To the best of my ability, I have told his story." So this is her book. She became intrigued by Michael Ross's case in the summer of 1995 during her tenure as editor-in-chief and publisher of the Connecticut Law Tribune. When the Connecticut Supreme Court overturned the 6 death sentences that had been given to him in 1987, he began lobbying to accept a death sentence to spare the families of his victims the pain of going through another trial. She was puzzled by this, by his unusual offer, and kind of that's how she began her plight to reach out to him and kind of spur a relationship. She wanted to find out more about this man who had been sentenced to death, was about to have that revoked, and then basically took it upon himself to take the sentence on again. There's more to that we find out through the book, but that's also what interests.
As did we, right?
Yeah,
we found
that's what interested me in this case. I'd never heard of such a thing, really. With all the different cases we've studied, I'm sure it's happened. Someone will probably send us like, "Oh, this guy," but I found that interesting that for the reason of sparing the victims' families, he seemed to be one of the more remorseful serial killers that we'd ever studied for someone who did such heinous acts. But when I really dove into it and learned more about him, because there's so much into his mentality in this, because she's talking to him and you get a lot of the interactions back and forth throughout this whole thing of their 10-year relationship. You find out it is all selfish reasons in the end.
Right. Honestly, I think it's because he'll never fulfill that sexual satisfaction ever again, being where he is, and he's like, well, I might as well die then. I mean,
and he really did hate himself. I believe. I truly did believe he had actually come very close to suicide several times early on in his crime spree. He had gone to the point of even standing on the edge of a bridge after his first rape, I believe. And
because
jumped.
he knew he wasn't going to stop from the very beginning. He knew he wasn't going to stop.
Which, I mean, and he wanted to get off on insanity. He truly believed that he couldn't help himself, that he had sexual sadism, that he couldn't really be satisfied sexually without inflicting pain or killing. Mm-hmm. Killing was really the part that got him off the most. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of people with afflictions mentally and whatnot that keep that shit. They don't act on it. You know what I mean? There's been plenty of times where I've wanted to go and hit someone that pissed me off, and I don't do it because I'm an adult. You know, that's the difference. It's like if you know you have these issues, you need to go talk to somebody. You need to get on medication. You need to do something.
But I think the issue lies not in an angry outburst, but more of a sexual outburst. I think that's much harder for especially men to control. I think that's ultimately why we have way more men serial killers, is because most of them are sexually motivated, and men are the ones who would go that far for a sexual pleasure.
Yeah, and it's just another thing that made this case so interesting is that when he was on death row, they put him on female hormones. We'll talk about it later, but they put him on therapy that lowered his testosterone to like almost female levels, like to where, and it actually killed all of his sexual urges. And he said he was truly happy. Like it cleared his mind. And for once he could actually not be thinking about rape at all times, essentially.
Right.
Sex.
Was that per his request, or was that?
Yeah, that's what he wanted.
That's what I thought.
He had to have it. And actually they took him off of it at one point because they didn't want to pay for it anymore, the state. Oh. And he was suicidal again because those urges came back. That's all he could think about. And behind bars, when you're sitting there all day, it was even worse than ever before because what else does he have to do other than sit there? And he would relive the murders in his head over and over again and masturbate. And he was begging them to put him back on this therapy. So that's one notch in the side of, I guess, like he didn't want to be that way. I think I truly believe that about him. He didn't want to be like that.
I agree with that.
The urges were so overwhelming to him.
Right.
That for whatever, he was too weak to fight it off. That's the problem.
Right. But I don't think that remorse was the main motivator in any of his noble actions throughout this case.
No.
The few noble actions that he took, I don't think remorse was any. And he says that himself. He talks about how he didn't feel anything, and he knows that's not right.
He wanted it. He thought it was odd that he felt nothing for those people, that they were like faceless women to him, that they were just a name on a sheet of paper. That was it.
Right.
He
couldn't even remember them during the murders.
No, they were just an object to fulfill the fantasy. That's all they were to him. They weren't people.
That blows my mind, dude. It's just the action. It's just the taking of a life. It's not even who she is or what she looked like.
Mm-hmm. And that's when you listen to him, there's interviews of him on YouTube, and it is so cold, so chilling hearing him talk about it in such a matter-of-fact way, and even giggling at times that are so inappropriate when recounting murders of young women, like teenage girls, rape and murder, like just kind of giggling, like the one pulled a knife on me, and I almost drove off the road because I was so surprised. Like literally like laughing like that about that. And then I raped and killed her. It's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Like you said, Kemper light, dude. Not as creepy as Kemper, but just every bit as matter of fact.
Yes.
Every bit.
Yeah. So now that we've given you the whole vibe to this guy, let's dive into his backstory and kind of see what created this monster, because he really did have it. It was really just mommy issues more than anything. I wouldn't say he had compared to a lot of other cases we've done, the childhood was pretty mild. It was just really a poor mom, like poor upbringing from the mother figure was really kind of
She just didn't want to be
problematic
there,
here.
She just didn't want to be there. She was in a place.
She didn't want to be there, and she took out all of her frustration on
Yes.
her oldest son, which was Michael Ross.
That's right. She was in a place within a family that she did not want to be. She just didn't want to be there. And you're right. And she probably saw everything she hated about herself and her husband in this child, and she took it out on him.
Yep. So Michael Bruce Ross was born on July 26th, 1959. Do you want to look up the July 26th birthdays for me real quick? I totally blanked on that on the crime line.
All right.
July 26, 1959 to Daniel and Pat Ross in Brooklyn, Connecticut. Connecticut, not big on serial killers. There's only this guy and one other big name guy who I looked up. I'm blanking on his name right now. But not much coming out of Connecticut, especially the northeast corner. It's known as the quiet corner of Connecticut, where it's just kind of family ties and farmland and very, very low crime rate, and just kind of like the ideal place to raise families and whatnot. Very, very family friendly place,
All right.
especially during this time.
Well, I got some birthdays.
All right, let's hear them.
We got some superstars, dude. We got Sandra Bullock.
Ooh.
All right. Kate Beckinsale.
Okay.
Jason Statham.
All right, mate.
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger. Oh, damn.
Dude.
Definitely superstar studded class here.
Oh, my
and
God.
And then Michael Bruce Ross. He fits right in, doesn't he?
Yep. And then you also got Kevin Spacey, who,
Oh, boy.
a great
another
actor.
another great rapist, right?
We won't go there. Moving on.
Yeah, let's just skim right past that one.
Alrighty.
It sucks, too, because that show was so good. House of Cards.
Oh, man. He's a great actor.
He really had to blow it, didn't he?
Shit. Yeah.
You know what? Is it coincidence that he always plays a piece of shit in every movie, though?
I don't think so.
He's just so naturally good at it. Some people are so good at being assholes in movies that you're like, there's no way you're not an asshole in real life. You're just too good at this.
You're right, dude. You're right.
What's her name? Katherine Heigl. Like she's kind of always a biatch and everything, and then it turns out from what you hear, she's a biatch. Like behind the scenes, she's a pain in the ass.
Dude, I mean, you play the same character over and over again, and you're picked for roles for a certain reason, right? You're picked for them for a certain reason. You kind of already embody that character. Like Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta comes to mind as someone who's just always he always plays a hothead because the dude's probably losing his shit in traffic every day. Or like throwing his coffee at Starbucks. Like, I don't know. I just picture him getting angry at everything, and it's just normal life.
Right. Those Chantix commercials, man. He looked rough in those.
he looked pissed to be there.
Right.
How much money does
Chantix.
Chantix have? That's all I could think. Oh my God.
Yep. All right. So yeah, he was raised. So as we mentioned, he was born July 26, 1959 in Brooklyn, Connecticut. The northeast corner farmland. He was born on a chicken farm, and that would kind of become his life's passion. Really, I mean, he went to school and everything, but he always went back to the chicken farm. That's where his roots were. That's what his father was proud of him for taking on the family trade, and so he was raised as the oldest child and had two younger sisters and a younger brother. His father, Dan Ross, was the chicken farmer that we mentioned. Man, a lot of stuff about chicken farming in this book that I found pretty interesting. Just the levels of how many chickens, like you don't even really comprehend. Because as someone who owns chickens and you own chickens,
right?
It's just different when you're talking like 100,000 chickens. Like,
oh my God,
literally,
yes.
The first thing they would do in the morning was go out there and like they'd have to clear out the dead chickens because just like hundreds would die overnight because there's just so many. So like that was a job he had to do from a young age, is like go in and clear out like 200 dead chickens, get those out, and then they'd have to kill the ones, as we kind of briefly touched on a minute ago, he learned to have to kill the weak ones, basically the ones that would never lay. They would have to pinpoint those ones, the ones that kind of looked sick and weak, and just kind of nip them in the bud and kill them before they died naturally.
Right.
And there was different methods to that that he would learn. And
Chicken farm just made sense, man.
Yeah.
It was a system,
Yep.
Nothing went to waste.
Yep. Michael was raised Christian Catholic and maintained some of the principles even after committing heinous acts. There were certain things he talked about with Martha that shocked her, like his coldness with certain things. And then like he would say like, I just felt wrong hitting a woman. And it's like, you raped and killed them. She was just blown away by some of the things he would say. The things that he felt bad about as opposed to the things he didn't feel bad about.
Right.
Were just, they made no sense. But it became,
very
it went back to
off-kilter.
the Christian upbringing.
Oh, well, of
He thought
course.
he had this image of himself as like this wholesome, corn-fed farmer boy, Christian boy, but he was out raping and killing people.
Right. Well, as long as he's not blaspheming, he can always be forgiven.
Exactly.
You rape and kill, and God will forgive you. It's fine.
Yeah. So his parents had married after his mom had discovered she was pregnant, and she was still in high school at the time. Their marriage would end up not being a happy one. Part of it was due to the fact that this unplanned pregnancy at such a young age forced his father to propose, and they got married early on just because of that's what you did at that time, in the early 60s, late 50s when you get pregnant.
What kind of man are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His mother, Pat, hated the farm life and family life, essentially. She blamed Michael, the oldest son and protagonist in this story, for ruining her 20s. Basically, she always looked at him as this burden that had ruined her life. If she hadn't had him, things could have been different. She could have moved to New York City or whatever. Instead, she's stuck on this chicken farm in Connecticut with a family she doesn't want. And she
Damn, that's harsh.
constantly let Michael know about this and was constantly verbally abusive, physically abusive. All the children really would learn to be afraid of her and learn little ways around skirting around her bouts of anger. She would just blow up in a second over nothing. Like they're kind of always walking on eggshells. They learned to like send one kid down in the morning and kind of get a feel for how things were that morning. And like they'd like be shaking, like walking a dish to the sink and hope not to screw something up or else she'd lose her mind on them.
I think
That type of vibe.
not to that extent, but I think most kids do that. They kind of have
Right.
that. It's usually the younger one, It's like, hey, go ask mom and dad if we can, whatever, or go see if we could get a cookie or get
You
something.
use the baby of the family as means to get what you want because they
Right.
have more of a soft spot for them.
That's right. My kids do that. They send my youngest daughter to ask for everything.
Yeah, how could you say no to her? She's too
I
cute.
know, right?
After having 4 children and 2 abortions, she ran off to North Carolina to be with another man. Hey, there's a North Carolina reference, no Vegas reference, but in every case, there's either Vegas or North Carolina, it
Dude,
seems, isn't there?
They pop up too
Isn't
much.
that weird? Isn't that weird? We don't do this intentionally, I swear.
Yeah, I know. It's weird.
When his mother returned home, she was institutionalized. This is kind of those days where a husband could kind of just bring if his wife was giving him a hard time, he could just go drop her off at an institution, as we talked about with Nellie Bly and all that.
Yep.
This was still kind of going on. The admitting doctor wrote that Pat talked of suicide and beating and striking her children. Then she would be let go. They analyzed her and pretty much just found that she had anger issues and whatnot, and nothing really to be done about it.
So no
As a
true
child-
psychological issues, or what do you think? Or you think it was just misdiagnosed? Do you think she passed anything on to Michael?
Maybe narcissism.
All right.
I don't think she had anything truly wrong with her. She just was. Her life didn't go the way she wanted, and she was bitter about it, and she took it out on people around her. I don't think she had any mental issues,
Okay. Fair enough.
and I think he kind of picked up on these tendencies to think about himself all the time. That's what she did, and then she would get mad at other people that things didn't turn out the way she wanted.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, your kids are watching you, even if they have disdain for you, like it appeared that Michael did. He was still watching and picking up how to be an adult from her.
Well, he disdained her, but at the same time, he always needed her acceptance all the way up into his adulthood. Like there was that weird relationship, like the Ed Gein thing, almost like a weird obsession she had with him and he had with her. She had this weird jealousy if he was with other girls, like if she didn't want him to date, even though all she did was ridicule him and beat him down. she also didn't want him getting the attention of other women. It was a very strange relationship she had with her oldest son.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It is
As a
very
child, Michael used to fantasize about taking women to a safe place, quote unquote, where he could keep them captive and they would worship him. Eventually, he would win them over by holding them captive.
Yeah, because that's how that works.
Yeah, the Munchausen by proxy thing or whatever. Or no, that's not Munchausen. What's the one where you hold someone captive and then they grow to love you or whatever? There's a whole syndrome to that.
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome. There you go. Good job. Yeah. A few of his family friends mentioned that his teenage uncle had molested Michael. They speculated that Michael may have been molested by his teenage uncle that babysat them all the time. The uncle had ended up committing suicide. He wandered off with a gun on the farm and shot himself, and wrote a letter saying that it was because he was gay, and that in eastern, northeast Connecticut during the 60s and 70s, it was not accepted to be gay. Right. And there was speculation because of what Michael turned out to be that he had been molested by this guy, but there's no evidence of it. So that has to be mentioned.
That is some strong speculation for no evidence.
I know, right?
Because
it seems like
that
people just
everywhere.
connected dots. It's all.
Yeah. And also, I think when people turn out as bad as Michael Ross did, they have to find something, right? They got to be like, oh, something really, really fucked him up. He can't just be a kid who grew up on a farm and his mama smacked him every once in a while and he grew up to kill people.
It also might be some prejudice in regards to the gay thing. The fact that
it could be.
He killed himself and he was gay and he no longer had the ability to say I had nothing to do with that. But because he was gay, all of a sudden he was a molester too. Like,
yeah, I don't find that fair. Yeah, with no other evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. After his uncle had committed suicide, the job of killing sick and malformed chickens became 8-year-old Michael's responsibility, and he was taught by his father how to do this. There was different ways that the book described. One way was to if you're sensitive to animal abuse, you might want to tune out for a few seconds. But one way was
or become
to bash their
vegetarian.
head on. Was to bash their head on a pole, which was, if done correctly, I guess, quick, relatively painless. Just boom, done. If you do it right, that's the thing. Is like you had to learn how to use the right amount of force.
Right.
A lot of people when fishing do the same thing. You whack the fish on the head. If you do it right, they're done.
Right.
Another way was to basically strangle the chicken or snap their neck. So he learned different ways, and some speculate that this bleached over into his later life, strangling women, that he was doing it with chickens at a young age, and he learned this kind of cold malice way of killing creatures, and it may have bled over into later life.
Well, now doing this at such a young age, I'm sure it was very exciting for him, but I think also the fact that he was doing this with his dad, I think that had a big impact on how he felt about it too, because he always was very affectionate when he talked about his father and the time he spent with his father.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe that is more why he over-romanticized this part of his life and the chickens and all that.
Yeah. And his dad was pretty cold with him all through his childhood, but same with his mom, he had this need for his dad to respect him, and he had the need to be he wanted to be like his dad, essentially, and that's why I think he went back to chicken farming after college. He could have gone on and done many other things, but he went back to this farm in a small town in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And people were wondering why the hell he would do that. He was at Cornell graduating. And
because you were happy and things were simple there. You know what I mean? But
and your dad respected you.
Yeah. Yeah.
His dad wanted him to take over the farm, and that's, that meant a lot to him. But his dad was stopped being cold with him, believe it or not, once he was on death row and he was no longer with Michael's mother anymore. Michael's mother, Pat, she seemingly made the father a lot colder. He had to a lot of times dole out the punishment. She would get angry with the kids, and then the father would have to come home and dole out the punishment. And so he was very cold with his kids for a long time until he got with a new woman. He got with Michael Ross's stepmom later on, and then he became this whole new warm person where he actually went to Michael's trial and showed love and all this stuff. Kind of odd.
Maybe just as he got older, he just realized that having a relationship with your son, what's left of a relationship with your son is better than none. I feel like parents come to that conclusion at some point in time in their lives.
And I think also Michael's father was always kind of walking on eggshells with Pat as well. He was always kind of it seemed like the whole household went with her moods. Like she could really bring everyone down in a split second. If she got angry over something, she would just take over everything.
Yeah, I got that vibe as well.
Yeah. Michael loved farm life and met his responsibilities while also attending high school. His mother, Pat, had an odd relationship with her son, as we've kind of brought up a few times. She constantly tore him down while also being extremely controlling. When she found a pair of his underwear with a stain from a wet dream, she made him wear the underwear on his head the whole next day. Very reminiscent of who was
rough.
it? Was it Ridgeway with the bed sheets with a lot of times it's the urinating in the bed, wet in the bed, and like the mother shaming their kids for that.
Right.
She was big on shaming Michael for masturbation. She was not okay with him masturbating. She would frequently run up the stairs and try to catch him in the act. Luckily for him, the stairs were squeaky, so he always heard her coming, and he was able to
to go ahead and squeeze one out right quick, huh?
Yeah. She wouldn't allow her oldest son to date or bring home friends. Michael Ross's sister has said that as a child, Ross took the brunt of his mother's anger, so even the other siblings admitted that their mom, Pat, pretty much always took out most of her anger on Michael.
Well, because you hold the older sibling responsible, especially if they're present. You know what I mean? I think that can be misconstrued sometimes. Because like a lot of times when I find my oldest daughter, she's almost a teenager, so she has nothing to do with anybody most of the time now. But my older son and my younger daughter, when they're playing and they're doing something that's like what the hell? Like somebody's obviously going to get hurt here, or this is a terrible idea. Like you're going to break a window or the car or something. Then I always blame it on him because he's older.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's like she's so much younger than you. You have to set the example, and I have to wonder how much of that got misconstrued. You know what I'm saying? Especially if he was quite a bit older.
That mixed with the resentment of him being the first child that kind of ruined her life. You know, it set this train in motion of ruining her 20s, and then it was just another kid after another kid. But it was Michael that, if she hadn't gotten pregnant with him, or if she hadn't, gotten pregnant with Michael's fetus, it would just kind of, that's a weird way of putting it, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. It could have been
always
anybody.
resented. Yeah, she always resented Michael for being that first kid that ruined her life, essentially. If she hadn't had him, then things would have been different for her.
Yeah, well, they would. She's not wrong about that.
Yeah. She also, Pat was very brutal with animals. Michael's sister Tina told a story of coming home from school one day and finding out that her mother had thrown the cat out of the second-story window. She was also known to vacuum the cat all the time out of frustration with the hair and whatnot. So she'd actually vacuum the cat. I'm sure the cat wasn't very happy about that.
No, I'm probably not. I'm sorry.
The sister Tina also said she also made us declaw the cat. She said if we didn't declaw the cat, that she would put a rock around its head and throw it in the lake.
Damn.
Very brutal. Like
she did not like cats, man. That's what I'm getting here.
That's over the top. That's torture of the cat.
Right.
There's a lot quicker ways to kill a cat than drowning it with a rock in a lake.
Right. Why do you even have cats? Like, just get rid of them. Or you live in a farm, just let them run around. They'll be fine. They have better opportunities than living there.
Yeah. Here's another story that kind of gives a little insight into Michael's psyche later on, maybe. Another message of Pat Ross's behavior was that her children should never stand up for themselves. At age 6, Michael was the constant target of a neighborhood bully named Johnny. One day, Johnny chased Michael all the way home, and in an uncharacteristically bold act, Michael picked up a stick, turned around, and started to hit Johnny with it. Startled at Michael's newfound courage, Johnny turned and ran. Hearing the commotion, Pat came to the window and observed the entire episode. She said, quote, "Bring me that stick." She called to her son. Obediently and proud that he had finally had the courage to defend himself, Michael picked up the stick and took it to his mother. It was a rare occasion when Pat carried out the beating herself rather than waiting for the father to come home to do it. When he got inside, Pat grabbed the stick from Michael and proceeded to, quote, "beat the hell out of me." Michael remembered, quote, "She was so mad and she beat me so badly that I needed a butterfly bandage for the cut on my forehead." Confused and hurt, Johnny knew that he was been essentially powerless against another bully. He said, quote, "It's emotionally castrating to do that to a little boy. The message is very clear. You can't stand up for yourself." This was a psychiatrist, actually, that was at his trial later that spoke about that event and what kind of message it relayed to the young boy that became a serial killer later on.
Right. I think I would have to. I'd have to see this scene to know who to believe here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because maybe he took it too far. Maybe the kid was just like teasing him and calling him names, and then he started beating the kid with a stick. It's like, maybe he took that a little too far.
I pictured it being very rage-filled, kind of like in A Christmas Story when Ralphie finally stood up to, what was his name? The red hair, the
yellow
ginger
eyes
bully
kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
He beat the
He
shit
had
out
yellow
of him.
eyes.
Yeah.
Yellow eyes.
Yellow eyes. Yeah. Ralphie but I mean that one feels okay though. You know? I don't know. For some reason.
Oh, that was great.
That just
That
feels
was
so
great. He was
justified.
barely even hitting the kid anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Back up.
Just letting him have it, buddy.
Yeah, that was great. Another event, which I found quite bad, from Mother Pat. She also made Michael have his favorite dog and possibly best friend in the world at the time because he didn't have many friends and he was, the target of bullies and whatnot. His dog, Charlie Brown, put down prematurely. Basically, he came home one day and Charlie Brown had starting to go blind but was still in good health overall. And his mother said, the dog's too old, kill it, take it out and shoot it. She told him to take the dog out and shoot it. He took it out. And he took it out by, I guess his grandfather lived kind of on the same farm on the other side or whatever. He took it over there, and his grandfather's like, you're not shooting that dog. So he basically told him to take it to the vet and have the vet put it down humanely. He held the dog as it died, and when he got back to the house, his family was then home, aside from just his mother who was there earlier, and they all basically chastised him for it and said, why would you kill Charlie Brown? Charlie Brown was in perfectly good health. And the mother said nothing, basically let him take the blame for it and whatnot. And he knew too. He knew that the dog was going to live a lot longer, but she made him put down this dog.
Oh shit, that's
Terrible.
fucked up. So not only does she hate him, she wants the whole family to hate him. That is some twisted shit right there.
Dude, you know what? And it's bringing back memory of reading this book. I didn't put it in the crime line, but that was what she was known for by the family. All the siblings, everybody said the same thing, is that you couldn't let her find out your weakness. Even the young daughters at a young age, they would hide things that they really liked from her. Like if they had a favorite doll, they wouldn't carry that doll around her and let her know that they liked it, because the second she found a weakness, even if it was her young child, she would take that. What was it? One of the daughters, I forget what it was. She a favorite blanket or something. She freaking ruined it. She found out the daughter liked the blanket so much and ruined it and acted like it was on accident, but they all knew. It's just shit like that.
Yeah.
She was very good at playing mind games with you like that. And I'm sure it made them hard to really trust anyone. When your mother's doing these devious acts to you like that at a young age, it's like...
It's like you almost wonder, it's like, do some people just want to be hated? I think they just want to be hated. Maybe they hate themselves so much. Maybe she had no self-worth whatsoever. Maybe she's not narcissistic. Maybe she just thinks she's absolute trash. And she's like, if I can get them to hate me, then I won't feel so bad about just leaving. Because it seemed like that's what she wanted to do anyways. You know what I mean? Yep. If it's your idea that I leave, then I'm not such a bad mother to society. Does that make sense? If your kids want you to leave and you're actually bettering their lives by not being in them, maybe you feel less guilty.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe she was hoping that they would be okay with her taking off, and I think they would have at a certain point.
I agree. Yeah,
life would have been a lot easier.
No doubt.
So Michael would excel in school all the way through, really. He was kind of like the teacher's pet all the time. He would end up graduating in 1977 from Killingly High School in Killingly, Connecticut. He would end up being accepted into Cornell University into their agriculture program and was even a teacher's assistant, as we briefly mentioned. He was the kid grading papers, and at one point, after getting done grading papers, followed a student in the class that he was a fellow classmate of, and that was his first victim. We'll get to that in a minute, but that just gives you some insight into what kind of evil monster he was.
Right.
Grading papers and then strangling one of the students later.
Right.
He was having no problems meeting girls at Cornell. Surprisingly, everything you would think, that's the one difference between him and Kemper, is that actually he didn't have a problem getting girls. He wasn't all that awkward with them, believe it or not. He was actually like an insurance salesman. He could talk. It was more just this internal problem where sexually he wasn't satisfied. He had these fantasies of rape and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I see that too. He's a little thinner than Kemper, not so big and goofy. You know what I mean?
If he ditched the stupid glasses, he has some of the worst eyeglasses you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
If he ditched those, especially younger, you see pictures of
Well,
him.
the mugshot
aside from
photo,
the glasses, he's not a bad looking
the
guy.
mugshot photo is everyone's least flattering photo. You know what I mean?
Right.
Under the pretense, and then
Yeah.
also the lighting too. It's just no one looks
Yeah.
good in a mugshot, dude.
Right. But there's a picture of him being walked to the police car
Yeah.
and when he was first caught, and he's young and thin, and aside from the glasses, like I said, he wasn't a bad looking dude. So I can see how he didn't really have a problem getting girls in college.
Yeah.
And he would end up having a serious relationship, which was going on. He was like in love with this girl, but however, she became pregnant. There was a surprise pregnancy. They would use condoms all the time, but then one weekend they got a little lackadaisical with it. You know, that's how that goes. It only takes once. She ended up getting pregnant, and when she told him, he didn't react well. They went on break in college, and by the time they met back up, she had an abortion, and he felt terrible about the way that he had treated the situation. He said that I felt like I should have been there for her,
Right.
and their relationship was never the same again after that. And he always speculated, even on death row later on, like what could have been with this relationship that he had in Cornell. He said that she was really perfect for him, and that he blew it essentially, and that maybe.
Well, it was the way
I think
he
it was
blew
wishful
it, too.
thinking. I think those demons were always going to catch up with him.
Yeah.
He would have gotten bored with her, and he would have been off raping and killing people. It was inevitable, I think, with him. He just had these demons that I don't think he was right for the insanity plea, but at the same time, he had a sickness, much like a pedophile, where, you know, if you don't go get help and you let those demons speak for you,
Right.
you're at fault.
Yeah.
But it's also unfortunate that that's what that ailment that you either were born with or that you somehow developed over time.
I think he was very aware of this
Yes,
ailment. He was very
definitely.
aware of it. That's why he drug his feet with the whole baby thing. From what I can tell, he basically, over that break, he had no contact with her whatsoever. So, I mean, if you had anything to do with a family or a baby, you thought you were capable of being a father or a husband, you would have interacted there. You wouldn't have allowed her to just be alone on this break. I mean, he can think about it all he wants, but he knows that he was incapable of that kind of relationship. He was at least that intelligent.
He would get into relationships with women, and he would do things to kind of push them away, it seemed.
Exactly.
Like there was a few times in college where he kind of pushed them away, and it was on his accord. And I think it's because, like, the things you're talking about, like he knew
Yep.
this won't last because I have these issues.
Yep. I have these needs that have to be met, and they are not met in this lifestyle.
Right. So that woman would end up going on to join the military. At the time when they were dating, she was in the ROTC, and she always kind of wanted to go on the military path, and that's where they split ways. By this time, he was exhibiting antisocial behavior, including stalking young teenage girls. So while at Cornell, he started to develop this habit and this newfound thing he would love to do is go out at night and just follow girls. And at first, he loved the idea that he could see them, that he was watching them, and they had no idea. And then it started progressing to the point where he wanted them to see him.
Yeah.
And he got off on their fear when he would see them lock eyes and like realize that he was following them. The fear that they had.
Yeah, that
really got him excited.
This reminded me of Bundy with the peeping Tom stuff
Yeah.
early on. Yeah, very reminiscent of Bundy.
It does seem to be a gateway thing, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it
Right? When
does.
you're a peeping Tom at a young age, it seems like a lot of times it's just a phase some young men go through, and then it never it goes anywhere. But a lot of times it progresses from there.
Yeah.
The excitement's not enough anymore, and you need to go a little further. You got to get a little closer.
Right. That's right.
At this time, he became an insurance salesman. He would be stalking females during his sophomore year in college and continued to do so during his senior year as well. This is when he would commit his first rape, was in his senior year at Cornell, and his first murder would follow very shortly after, the same month of his graduation in May of 1981. And this would be Zung Nok Tu, a student who was in the class that shared a class with him. She had come to the United States from Vietnam when she was 10. She mastered English almost immediately and was a high honor student at Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda in Maryland. And she was a quiet but studious student, but far from reclusive. Here's a quote from one of her friends. "We went to Bloomingdale's and bought these matching work shirts. She lived in that," recalled a freshman roommate, Victoria Balfour. Maria, another close friend in college, did not want her last name used, but described Zung as a very bright and sweet and kind. She had a wry sense of humor. Zung was an economics major and spent her junior year at the London School of Economics. She had a large extended family that was so proud of her attending Vassar. They all came in carloads at the end of the year to pick her up. She was a big source of pride for their family. She graduated from Vassar in 1977 and won the economic department's honors prize. Her friends described her as very polite, maybe 5'1" and 90 pounds at most, so a very tiny girl. Her body would end up being found at the bottom of Fall Creek Gorge in Ithaca, New York, near the fraternity house where Ross lived. She had had an evening class with him that night and was last seen alive at that class. Campus and Ithaca police initially listed her death as suicide, which really angered her family and friends because they knew that she basically had never. That was
no
not
way.
a possibility with this.
No, for
young
all
woman.
she had accomplished, the track she was on, she was not about to take her life at this point.
Yeah.
I think things were working out for her.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of her friends said, I don't think I ever heard of her having a single bout of depression. She was not that kind of person. She enjoyed living too much. She enjoyed everything too much. Ross said after this one that he hated himself for what he had done and tried to commit suicide, but lacked the ability to do it and instead promised himself he would never hurt anyone again. He said that all the way to the end, that he was a coward. He never was able to pull the trigger, no pun intended, as far as killing himself.
And this was, right, and this was part of the process. He would say he would never do it again or he'd never act on it. And then it happens and then he feels terrible and then he wants to kill himself. And he's like, I'm never doing that again.
Yep.
Then the urge comes up and he does it again.
Yep.
It's just no impulse control as far as this goes.
Yep. So that would end up being his first victim, and it wouldn't be discovered who killed this young woman until much later. The day after graduation from Cornell, Michael headed for his new job in Lewisburg, North Carolina. And so
welcome back.
Welcome back to North Carolina. He started work at Cargill as is that how you pronounce it? Cargill?
I guess that's a company.
Oh, I thought maybe that was a town in North Carolina.
No, I don't.
Oh, duh. He started work at Cargill. Duh. I thought maybe that was the town, but apparently it's the company.
Yeah.
As a production management trainee the following Monday in the egg processing plant. On the weekend, he looked for a place to live and rented a small trailer about 10 minutes outside of the road to Raleigh. Raleigh? Is that right?
Raleigh.
Raleigh.
Yep. That's the state capital.
That's not far from you, right?
That's about 3 hours from me, actually.
Oh, okay.
That's a little closer to the coast.
Okay. The move did nothing to calm his obsessions. He was in an unknown environment, feeling off from his family and fiance. If anything, his frustration fueled his urges. He was in another serious relationship at this point, which didn't last. Hence the fiance.
Right.
Quote, I began stalking the day I got to Lewisburg, even before moving into my trailer, as soon as I began to make regular trips to Raleigh on stalking excursions.
Yeah, because now he's in a new place, dude.
Yep.
He's got this new mystery to him. Nobody suspects him. Nobody knows who he is.
Oh, we've seen the success of serial killers being outside of their jurisdiction, being in places
They love that.
they're not from. I mean, how are you going to track that in those days, especially in the 80s, 70s? It's nearly impossible.
Exactly. You have no reputation. Nobody knows you. You could literally be anywhere for any reason, according to anybody else. You know what I'm
you're
saying?
an unknown entity just passing through.
That's right.
So in Rollsville, is that how you pronounce that one?
Yeah, Rollsville, I think. Yeah.
On August 25th, 1981, Michael attacked another woman. He was prowling around when he spotted Carol, which was actually not her real name, leaving the local post office, pushing a 7-month-old baby in a stroller. This is a horrific part of this tale. If you're sensitive, well, you're listening to a true crime podcast, but this was one of his rapes that I thought was mentionable just because of how heinous this act is. As she did
It's
almost
necessary to know.
Yeah, the kind of animal we're dealing with here. As she did almost every day, she walked a quarter mile back to her house with the baby stroller with her child, unaware that she was being followed. Michael ended up raping the woman in front of her baby, and she would ultimately identify him as her attacker 3 years later once he was discovered to be what he was. She would see his face and connect the dots there. But yeah, there's a lot more details to that story that I really didn't even want to go into. But the whole gist of it is that he was that monstrous that he actually used the baby against her in a sense. He was threatening to harm the baby.
Yes.
If she didn't do what he wanted and those type of things. And yeah, it was horrible to listen to.
I mean, he would go to those extents. I honestly think people are like, how did he get these women to just submit to him? He wasn't that big. He wasn't a big, strong guy. It's because of the level he was willing to go verbally, the threats he was willing to make, I think caught these people off guard. You're like, holy shit, you're going to do what to my baby?
Yeah, and also
Like,
he did the old shtick of making them feel comfortable initially. He would a lot of times he would pick up a woman who was hitchhiking, and he would convince them if that he was going to take them where he wanted. Once they discovered that wasn't happening, he would basically just tell them like, do what I want and you'll live. And he would get them in a vulnerable position where they're tied up face down, and at that point they finally learned that they weren't going to live. It was that he wanted control the whole time.
And what I found really interesting was, conveniently enough, he couldn't remember what he said to get any of these women. Like, ultimately, he couldn't remember that one phrase that got them to submit or to cower. Right. He could never remember it. If you watch his interviews, he's
didn't matter to him.
Something. I don't remember what I said.
Right. It didn't matter as long as the end goal was met. It didn't matter what means you had to use to get there,
Well, true, but I think it also has something to do with him not wanting to be seen as this monster.
No doubt,
horrible fucking person. He would rather be seen as someone who just can't help it, and he's acting on impulse. Not important what I said. It kind of is.
And a little insight into that, we've talked a lot of times about serial killers, how they even draw lines where they go, well, I wouldn't harm a child or whatever. There was lines he drew where there was 2 young girls that he would end up abducting, raping, and killing later on that were 14. They were best friends that we'll talk about. And the common theory you'll see a lot of times when you read about this guy is that the only girl that he never raped that he killed was one of those 2 14-year-old girls. He didn't rape her because she was too small and he felt bad. That was absolutely 100% false. And you'll learn a lot of the details in the book. And he actually did rape her and before he killed her. And it was just kind of like he put that out there because he felt bad or whatever. But he cared about what people thought about him. And that's what we find out ultimately. He hated the fact that everyone hated him and despised him and saw him as this monster. And that played into a lot of his actions later on. That's why he did the whole taking on the death penalty because he didn't want to go through another trial. A lot of it had to do with the fact that he didn't want a bunch of people sitting outside the prison while he was being executed cheering. That was his biggest fear.
Yeah,
he brought that up several times.
Day after day, because he used to get tons of mail, and that shit wasn't positive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of it was. I know there's women who fall in love with these guys, and I understand that. But I mean, in the documentary, he just showed stacks and stacks of letters that he'd been received. So a lot of that is hate mail. Well, I don't know if he'd be keeping that, but for whatever reason, he's catching a lot of shit, which he should be.
Oh yeah, no doubt. For a long time, he was known as the biggest monster Connecticut had ever seen, pretty much.
Yeah. They
were wondering how somebody like that could come out of that area. So.
Well, they're kind of snooty over there, to be fair. They think their shit don't stink. You got psychos up there too, Connecticut.
Our shit don't stink. Our chicken shit might stink, but our shit don't stink.
Yeah, that's right.
Chicken shit is awful smelling. It's so bitter. It's like vinegary. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And as someone who hates vinegary stuff, I hate mustard. I hate anything vinegar based. It's like extra repulsive to me.
So
let's dive into his first arrest. Not long after moving to North Carolina, Michael was required to attend a month-long management seminar, mostly at the corporate office in Minneapolis, but including a week in Illinois visiting various Cargill companies. The first night in Illinois, Michael was restless, and it didn't take long before he saw a 15-year-old girl walking along the road 3 blocks from home to a nearby motel to buy a pack of cigarettes. So she was walking to the local motel to get some cigarettes just a few blocks from her house. On her way to the motel, she became suspicious when a car passed her 3 or 4 times. While she was inside the motel, she noticed that the same car was parked outside and the driver was staring at her through the window. Very fucking creepy. And bold, I think that's another sign of him being somewhere where no one knew him and he felt a little bit more bold, like he couldn't be caught,
Right.
She would end up leaving the motel and headed home along the same well-lit path. She saw Michael coming toward her, trying to hide behind telephone poles as he wove back and forth. Good God.
Dun, dun, dun,
right?
Dun, 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 dun.
Seriously, not so sneaky there. I picture him thinking there was no way she saw him, right? He thought he was so much sneakier than he was.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
As he passed her...
hiding skills.
Right. As he passed her, he grabbed her from behind and put both arms around her throat and told her not to say anything. Quote, "I'm not going to hurt you, just give me your money." She screamed, but he put his hand around her mouth, put a knife to her throat, and pulled her into the woods. Initially, he threw her on the ground, but then stood her up, thinking that he wanted money. She gave him $2 she had in her back pocket, but instead of taking it and leaving, he walked her deeper into the woods, all the time seeming nervous. Finally, he threw her down on the ground and stuffed his handkerchief into her mouth as she lay on her stomach, but then she heard police searching in the woods, responding to a neighbor who had reported initial screams. So saved by the local people in town that had heard her screams and done the right thing and being cautious, called the police who were already out searching for her. That's why I went into so much detail. I wouldn't have gone into all this detail if I didn't know it had a kind of a happy ending to this one in particular. Scared, Michael jumped up and ran. Quote, I could have raped her, but I just kept her quiet while I tried to make some sense of what was going on. But when I saw the police car, I ran off. I don't think I would have hurt her even if the police didn't come. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
Yeah, bullshit, you coward.
100% bullshit.
Yep. When the police were driving Priscilla home, she spotted his rental car parked along the road. The police waited for him and arrested him when he returned on foot to pick it up. So this would be his first arrest. The attack lasted less than 15 minutes, but it traumatized this girl so much that she quit high school and went into seclusion. That was the last report of her on the police record. This was the first time Michael had been caught and arrested. He was not only scared of what would happen to him legally, but also ashamed when he had to call his parents to get him out to bail him out of jail. He was also terrified that someone would connect him to the murder and rapes in Cornell. On advice from his lawyer, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years probation for unlawful restraint. After resigning from Cargill, he returned to Connecticut to try to pull his life together, again convincing himself that he could stop. So that whole moment, once again, where it's like, yeah, I've done wrong,
here we go.
but that'll be the last time. I'm going to pull it together.
Right.
I'm going to be a good person.
Over a new leaf.
Yeah. Which leads us to his next murder. Tammy Williams was the only child of Norma and Everett Williams. She loved to figure skate and played basketball and would probably be alive today if she hadn't looked at Ross after he raped her and said that she knew who he was. So she actually knew Michael Ross. This was so close to his home. She'd actually walked through his farm several times. They went to school together. Tammy lived in Brooklyn, Connecticut, the same small town, barely a mile from where Ross grew up, and his family had the Large Eggs farm. Michael had spotted Tammy walking home from her boyfriend's house less than a mile from his farm. He had gone to high school with her. He took her to a secluded location where he raped and strangled her. When she disappeared January 5th, 1982, her father and uncle and other relatives organized search parties crisscrossing the wooded areas and marshes surrounding her home. They found no clues or sign of her. She was 17, and she would end up being missing for almost 2.5 years before being found. It was really devastating, said her uncle, Steve St. John. We all went out and searched. Come to find, about 2 years later, I could have walked right over her body. So they had searched the area where her body was later found several times.
Right. And you don't think Michael identified her? You don't think he knew who she was and he planned on killing her from the start?
I don't think it was planned out. I think it was an opportunity thing where maybe he had seen her before and fantasized about her, and then all of a sudden there she is alone, and he had his chance. Mm-hmm. I don't think he.
That's what I'm saying.
Premeditated to where he waited for her at her house and then I think he was just driving and saw her. A lot of times that was his crimes. They were just opportunity, roadside strangler type thing where it's like, there she is. I'd pull over and she's isolated, alone.
Right, but I think he knew who she was. Is what I'm saying. Someone like Michael, with
no doubt,
as intelligent as he was, he knew who she was.
Yeah.
He likes to say, "Oh, she'd be alive if she didn't identify me." No, I think you picked her out, you knew her, and you were going to kill her from the beginning because she does know who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, her uncle said the scary thing about this whole thing was that she knew him. It really changed not only our lives, but the lives of everyone in the community. You never used to lock your doors. We used to let the kids go out and play, be by themselves, and walk to school. That all changed. Yeah, so this was such an innocent time and place that he really changed forever. Absolutely. Let's talk about his next victim, Paula Pereira. In March of 1982, a 16-year-old curly-haired blonde named Paula Pereira, who had been missing for more than 2 weeks, was found dead on the side of the road in the town of Wallkill, about 60 miles north of New York City. Paula was the girl everyone wanted to be friends with in school. She loathed cliques and bent her ear for everyone. Hanging out with Paula was always a carefree adventure, rarely scripted and sometimes reckless. Quote from a close friend of hers, "We'd ride our bikes for miles. One summer we rode for so long we got a bad sunburn. We looked like lobsters." But Paula's biggest adventures, the ones she embarked on with her flip-flop with the flip of her thumb, concerned her tight-knit group of friends. So she was known to hitchhike, and she believed the best in everyone. She said, "I wouldn't take any rides from creeps," basically. She, I guess, estimated that wrong on this day. She hitched a ride with the wrong person.
Indeed.
Yeah. She'd tell us all these stories about the people she would meet, while all along we'd be like, okay, that's great, but this time, that's great this time, but don't do it again. We would tell her again and again not to do it. And on March 2nd, 1982, Paula asked a friend for a ride after she missed the bus to the vocational school where she was taking culinary classes. When the friend could not oblige, Paula hitched a ride. It was her last. Ross, then 22, was headed home after visiting his girlfriend at Cornell University when he picked up Paula. He would end up dragging her off into the woods where he beat, raped, and strangled her. She would be found 2 weeks later. So you gotta, man, that's one of those moments where it's like the friend that she called for the ride, and the friend said they couldn't. Like, how terrible do they feel forever? You know, they must feel somewhat responsible, even though it's totally not their fault. You can never predict something like that. But
you can never, yeah.
But how do you
don't know
not?
What they had to do.
How do you not think about what could have been had you just, dropped whatever you were doing and given her that ride?
But again, time after time, people told her to stop hitchhiking.
Mm-hmm. True.
You're talking about in the 80s here.
Yep.
I mean,
we'd already seen what the 70s hitchhiking had
hitchhiking.
brought us throughout the country.
Yes.
All the different serial killers.
Yes.
In April of 1982, Ross had his second run-in with the law when he followed home a pregnant female off-duty police officer from the laundromat. He knocked at her door and claimed to have had car trouble. So he followed her to her apartment, saw her go inside, which, when she lived in, knocked on the door and pulled the old car trouble routine. This is pre-cell phone. How many lives has cell phones saved just from the fact that how many people used to knock on doors and say, I need to use your phone, and end up either robbing you, killing you, whatever. Nowadays, we know if you're knocking and you need to use a phone, it's like,
dude,
you ain't got a cell phone, motherfucker?
Yeah, get out.
Right?
Yeah, I told you that happened to me in Vegas. Somebody knocked on my door at 11 o'clock at night wanting to use my phone. I'm like, no.
Right, that's happened to me too, man.
There's a gas station down the road. Gas station down the road.
Home burglaries are a real problem, and a lot of times that's how it goes. They knock on the door. More than anything, they're just hoping that no one answers, so then they could go around the back. Once someone answers, they're like, shit, move on to the next one type of thing. Or if they hear dogs barking, whatever. But they got to have some stupid excuse if someone does answer, and that's the whole, I need to use your phone thing. It's like,
exactly.
What year is it?
Right.
So
I just read How to Be a Criminal for Dummies, and it said.
Right. It's surprising to me, her being a police officer, that she actually let him inside. But one safeguard she used was that she actually asked him for his name, and he actually obliged and gave her his real name, which gives you some insight that he was planning on killing her, I would think. You wouldn't give your real name if you were going to rape someone and then leave. Like, makes no sense. So
no, he was absolutely planning on killing her. I think he even showed her his ID. I believe she asked for his
ID. Maybe that's why she felt
officer,
confident enough to let him in, right? If someone shows you their ID.
Mm-hmm.
Once inside, he attempted to choke her, but she was able to fight him off, and he fled. Although he had given her his actual real name, as we mentioned, Ross would end up being tracked down and identified by the woman and arrested for assault. However, he only spent 1 month in prison before being bailed out by his parents. He was evaluated by psychiatrists at this time and found to be in a state of turmoil over his parents' recent divorce, which is just laughable. It's like you're entering a woman's house and attempting to rape her and whatnot. It's because and you're in your 20s and it's over, like, your parents getting divorced. Like, come on, what a cop out. Like,
yeah, he's full of shit on that. Why do you think he chose her though? All of his other ones were small, vulnerable victims, and then you're going to choose an off-duty police officer?
She may not have been a very big woman,
that's how I expected it to go.
She may not have carried herself like she was off-duty. She was wearing plain clothes, and maybe she wasn't a very big woman. You don't have to be very big to be a cop. So he just underestimated her and had no idea.
He didn't stalk her long enough.
Yeah, exactly.
He would have found out she was a cop. I mean, cops, they got some kind of hand-to-hand combat, enough to take on somebody who's 160 pounds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and someone who likes control. I don't know. As much as he liked someone to show signs of pain and whatnot, that he got off on that as a sexual sadist, he wanted control. And when they fought him from the get-go and he never gains control, it would make him nervous. And so we've said time and time again on this, it's always better to fight than to not, you know what I mean? To make noise, to make a scene. Don't give them the control that they want, because it never ends well.
Right, and no matter what, they don't want you to fight. Regardless of how big they are, they don't want any fight at all. Exactly.
Much like we just talked about with them, someone breaking into a home. They're hoping no one's there, no dogs are there. It's much easier.
Right. Yep.
So let's talk about Deborah Smith Taylor. Deborah disappeared on June 5th, 1982 after a quarrel with her estranged husband. Their vehicle had run out of gas and the two parted in search of a service station, walking in opposite directions. they had gotten into this argument and they were fighting, and she wandered off. And a witness reported seeing Deborah sitting on a park bench in Danielson about 11 p.m. 3 months later, hunters would find her remains in Canterbury. She was a very good aunt, according to her brother, and the loss of Deborah, the family believes, weakened their usually tough father as he fought leukemia. He would end up dying in 1984 when he was 56. The father and daughter rest beside each other in a local cemetery. And so she had apparently, being upset with her husband and wandering off, she must have hitched a ride with Ross. You know, he found this vulnerable moment for her, and she got in the car and did his typical MO of probably taking her off into the woods and strangling her.
Right.
Her skeletal remains would be found 3 months later after her murder. She had been tied up, raped, and strangled. Let's talk about Robin Stavinsky, who was 19. She was known as a mischievous teenager, strong-willed, and a blonde tomboy by her friends. It's a kind of an older term that you don't hear of too much anymore.
No, you don't.
Quote, she would have been a beautiful young woman, a really good person who would have put 100% into whatever she did, said her mother, Joan Stavinsky. Quote, it's very sad that it never happened because she was simply in the wrong place at the time. That it ever happened because she was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Like most of these women were.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was just a fluke. Mm-hmm. Just a fluke.
Stavinsky's coworkers were the last people to see her alive on November 16th, 1983. She had recently moved to Norwich, where she planned to keep working until she saved enough money for college. A jogger found her body near the entrance to a hospital in Norwich. Her family recounts her childhood stories with great detail as if they happened yesterday. Her stepsister recalls how Robin, a state champion discus thrower, would ascend to every 7-step staircase in the house, barely touching a step. She was a hell of an athlete. She was actually known as the Hulk to the neighborhood boys. Like she was, because of her muscles, she was pretty jacked apparently.
Wow. Why did he pick her? You know?
I
I think
don't know.
he was just wanting a challenge at the end here.
I don't know.
He was just like, or maybe he wanted to get caught. Maybe he wanted somebody to beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. Her family
Maybe
even
he felt less guilty.
Her family even wondered how he was even able to gain control over her, as tough as she was. Her mother said, quote, she had one speed and it was super speed. From hockey to water skiing, there wasn't a sport Robin couldn't ace. In local newspaper stories about her success in high school track and field, students talked about how they idolized her. Newspaper photographs of her in action on the field show Robin with a determined face, muscular thighs, and outstanding discus form. Quote, the boys in the neighborhood feared her mother said. And the people in her family, like I said, could never understand how Ross was able to overcome her sister's power. Quote, I still can't believe how he could have gotten the best of her, said her sister. She was a fighter. She took care of all of us. I could never understand how this could happen to someone with her will and strength. Her mother said that she neither nor Robin's father would attend the scheduled execution, but that the family would have representatives there. They said, quote, will it bring us closure? No. Will I feel sorry for him? No. So that's speaking of his later execution, which we already kind of spoiled earlier. He was executed after a long time on death row.
Right.
So let's get to the unfortunate...
The youngest victims.
Yeah, the youngest victims, the pair of best friends that were 14 years old. 2 months before they died, on an afternoon when they had nothing better to do than just be best of friends, Leslie and April drew up adoption papers for one another. They adopted each other as sisters, making all sound quite official, using their middle names and all. So they basically lived 3 doors down from each other, and they had been friends since they were 6 years old, been best friends, and to the point where they dreamed of being sisters and even drew up fake adoption papers. Quote, if April was down there, Leslie was up here. Leslie's father, Edwin Shelley, said as the motioned to a window that looked out on Dena Lane, where April Bruness lived with her mother and stepfather a few houses away. The girls had been thick as thieves since the Rhodes moved to the neighborhood when the girls were about 6. They signed cards to one another, love you like a sis. They made cookie dough ornaments and drove their parents crazy with their hysterical giggling. The girls had gone to First Congregational Church of Griswold that Easter Sunday morning in April of 1984. So this was Easter Sunday, 1984. Leslie spent the afternoon babysitting her little sister, and when the father came home, Leslie asked if she and April could go into Jewett City, the center of Griswold, to catch a movie. Shelley gave his permission, but told Leslie before she left she had to give him a kiss on the cheek. Quote, I hadn't shaved. I was grizzly, Shelley said. She bent down and kissed me on the cheek. The 2 girls, inseparable, left for the movies. Leslie called her father about 7 p.m. to say that they were on their way home. that Miss Rude was picking them up. However, they actually didn't have a ride from the other mother. Robin said their parents were quite strict and that she and her siblings were required to call their parents anytime they changed locations, but the girls didn't have a ride. They were hitchhiking home, and it was Michael Ross, unfortunately, who picked them up, offering them a ride. He drove them to Preston to a deserted stretch of road near the woods. They had asked him to drop them off at this gas station, and after he passed the gas station, one of them pulled out a knife, actually, and that's what we talked about earlier in the interview he's done, where he kind of giggled about one of them pulled out a knife, and I almost drove off the road.
Yeah. Especially at 14, I was surprised at this. When I read this, I was like, okay, 14-year-old had a knife. She wasn't stupid.
Yep.
I mean, somewhat prepared.
Yeah, it was dark but mild out. He pulled April out of the car first and made Leslie get into the trunk so she couldn't run. Michael would go on to rape and kill both girls. The Shelleys and Rhodes had no idea what happened. When the girls did not return home, both fathers went knocking on doors of friends' houses and looking in areas where the teens were known to party. Quote, I guess we kind of put ourselves on numb, Edwin Shelley said. We didn't know if she'd run away or been killed or what. And they would later find out the unfortunate news that they were indeed killed. So let's get into Michael Ross's final victim, the one that would take him down. Wendy Barabalt was well liked by her friends at Norwich Free Academy, who described her as a caring and sensitive person who enjoyed life. The 17-year-old junior from Lisbon liked going to the movies and hanging out at the beach. She loved music and would sit in on jam sessions with a local band that played some of her favorite tunes. Wendy left her parents a note on the kitchen counter on June 13th, 1984, saying that she was walking to a nearby convenience store. She never returned. She was last seen alive walking along Route 12. Her body was found 2 days later under a pile of rocks near the road. It was a trip learned during the investigation of Baralt's death that helped lead police to Ross. A tip. He was so brash with this one. Is that what you were going to say?
That's what I was just about to say. So brazen with this one. I watched a walkthrough. This guy did a walkthrough of it in 2011, exactly where he saw her, where his car was parked, and where he walked along her on the side of the road, how far off the road.
He did it in front of everyone on the main strip.
Dude, super brazen.
He talked about it actually in this book in an interview with Heather, the author, and he basically said that he alluded to the fact that he kind of wanted to be caught at this point, and he knew that he was never going to stop and that something had to stop him, and he didn't have the courage to kill himself. So he just saw her and in front of everyone just did this dramatic U-turn and like screeched in front of her and got out of the car and just like basically abducted her in front of people, and that's what got him caught.
Right down in the woods.
Yeah.
I mean, he waited until less traffic was coming, but this is a pretty busy road.
Yeah.
The video that this guy did, I mean, he was walking along this stretch for probably 5 to 6 minutes, and cars were constantly coming by. I don't think there was ever a time where you would be able to grab someone and take them down with no one seeing.
Right.
Now, this is in 2011. I'm sure, in the 80s it wasn't quite that busy, 1984.
Yeah.
But still a busy road.
Yeah, so they had seen her with a man in a blue compact car. Investigators focused on more than 2,500 owners of blue Toyotas registered in Connecticut. And believe it or not, their first stop was Michael. Out of 2,500 owners, they narrowed it down to less, and then they basically went to the one closest to the area of the abduction, which was Michael Ross. They went to his home because his house was the center of the small circle where the woman had either disappeared or where the bodies were found. Yeah, so they were also starting to connect and possibly think that one person was killing these women in Connecticut. They thought they might have what I'm sure at this time was not even a common word used, serial killer, because it's still the 80s.
Right.
But Ross invited the police in and within hours was detailing his murders and leading police. So he made them work for it a little bit, but he knew that like we said, he needed to be stopped. And so he kept giving them, it's like the cop was about to leave and then he would give them a little bit more to keep him intrigued. And then he was basically saying like, come on, catch me. Come on, I need to be stopped.
Right.
And because he basically
like, dude, I got dinner. I need to get home, man. I'm gonna call it a day. I'll come back tomorrow. No, listen.
Yeah, one of the things he did was the day that this woman was abducted, he had an alibi for that entire day except for the time period where she was taken. He's like, I was at work until about 3, and it's like she was abducted at 4 or whatever. It's just like, I have no idea what I did at that time. It's weird. It's like blank on my mind. I don't remember. I remember everything else vividly.
Gosh, I may have killed someone. I just don't know. I may have went bowling. I just don't know.
And he even offered up the fact that he had been a sexual offender twice in the past, that he'd been arrested for basically assault on women, and gave that cop a little bit more You know, to the point where the cop's like, do you want to come in for an interview?
You
within
know what? You want to
within
come
minutes,
on down to the station?
right? Within minutes, he had just been offering up all these murders that he had done.
You want to wear these handcuffs just for fun? I'll let you
Right.
ride up front.
Exactly. Yeah, and so in 1987, Ross would be convicted of the murders of 4 of the 8 women. When he confessed to having killed them, it took the jury 86 minutes of deliberations to convict him, and only 4 hours to decide on his punishment, which was death.
Which he was thrilled about.
Yeah, well,
I think he was. You
Yeah,
think he was
initially-
right away? I mean, he said he was, but maybe not right away.
initially, I think he was more in shock. I think he actually thought he had a chance at getting off on insanity. He was kind of dumbfounded that they didn't believe him, that he couldn't stop himself from doing these things and stuff. But apparently, he doesn't understand. Insanity means you basically could not control yourself, and you had no idea what you were doing was wrong. You know, we've talked about it a million times, but like
Right.
what Herbert Mullen does, where it was just like walks into a church and just kills the priest like boldly in front of everyone. He was if you're attempting to cover up your crimes and you're showing that you know what you're doing is wrong, then you are not going to get off on insanity.
Well, I think that's what he was trying to do with that last one. I think that's why.
Maybe.
But that
Maybe,
just wasn't
yeah.
quite brazen enough. Maybe if you tried to kill her on the side of the road,
Yeah.
maybe, then people would be like, whoa, what the hell?
Yeah, but
you
you
still
still-
took her off the road.
Yep.
I think he was kind of like, this is a win-win, right? If I don't get caught, well, then I just got satisfied. If I do get caught, then good. I'll be stopped and I'll go to jail. Either
Yeah.
way is fine. I'm not going to try not to get caught, but I'm not going to be an idiot either.
Exactly. Like we said, make him work for it a little bit.
Right.
The trial itself faced a lot of criticism in regards to the judge who presided over it. He was seen like clipping his nails during the defenses when they brought up like psychiatrists and stuff to try and basically say that he was crazy. The judge would be sitting up there rolling his eyes. Like he wasn't doing anything on the record that would show malpractice or whatever, but he was basically like putting this image out to the jury that he didn't buy the insanity defense at all.
Right.
Which is kind of funny to picture. He's up there rolling his eyes, clipping his fingernails as the guy's going on about how this guy's crazy. Michael's execution would be the first in Connecticut and the whole of New England since 1960 if it was carried out. The last execution in Connecticut before the state repealed capital punishment in 2012. So he was a very rare occurrence in Connecticut if this thing was carried out at this time. You know, it was obviously scheduled and whatnot. So let's talk about his imprisonment. When he first got to death row, Michael was consumed by anger. He felt that he didn't get a fair trial and that Malchek and Sati were twisting the evidence, those were the prosecutors, to secure a death sentence. The judge was, he felt that the judge was against him and that the jury ignored the evidence. It was a very personal feeling of injustice, not a critique of the entire justice system. He began to do legal research to keep busy. Eventually, he was allowed to get books from the law library, but also got lawyers to donate to their outdated books for Death Row Library, and even got the Law Tribune to provide a free subscription. After about a year, he realized that his case was not unique and that abuses occur in many capital cases. Seeing this, he started writing anti-death penalty articles, but instead of making Michael feel less persecuted, these activities made him feel hopeless. He had decided that the entire system was broken and corrupt, and that's what I was saying. He was writing these articles, and he was actually being paid. They were being published in religious newspapers, magazines, whatnot, and he was making decent money doing that. And actually, the prison cut him off and told him he couldn't make money with these articles anymore, so he basically had someone on the outside collect the money and then give it to him, so there was like a middleman to where he wasn't being paid directly by them. So he found the way around it.
He's no idiot.
Right. He slowly spiraled into a deep depression. Prozac helped, but his violent sexual fantasies became much worse. This is something he talked about. He said, one of the cruel ironies of prison with its lack of physical and mental activity is that it's the perfect place for mental illness to grow stronger. Quote, on the outside, at least I had work on the daily to keep my daily activities to keep my mind busy and drive away the thoughts. When there's nothing to do but sit in an empty cell, the thoughts of raping and murdering became much larger part of my life. The hardest time for
distractions.
me, right? The hardest time for me was in the evening when it came time to relax and go to sleep. I couldn't relax without the sexual imagery invading my mind, without a feeling of an immense compulsion to masturbate. I fought the urge. I could never get to sleep, so daily masturbation just before bed became the norm. Once I gave in and satisfied the urges, I had no problem sleeping.
Why didn't you just do that in life, fuckhead?
Exactly.
You'd still
right.
be out there. Jesus.
Yep.
Go to your room, rub one out, watch a horror movie, whatever the hell you got to do.
Yeah, don't walk
Do it.
around with a loaded gun all the time, so you make mistakes.
Seriously.
It's like in Something About Mary when he's talking about, oh my God, you went out on a date without flogging the log first? What is the matter with you?
What are you doing? Do you even prep, bro?
Right. So he says, at these times, masturbation would often be painful as I rubbed it to open sores before Before this first trial began, Dr. Berlin told Michael about his clinic at Johns Hopkins and the success he'd had treating patients suffering from sexual sadism with Depo-Provera. And that's basically hormone. It would depress his body's production of testosterone to the point where his sexual cravings should go down. Yeah.
Right. It's the chemical castration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some refer to
I think.
Yeah, some refer to the controversial treatment as chemical castration, but Dr. Berlin objected to that term's negative connotations and considered it misleading. Quote, I prefer talking about medications that suppress sexual appetite, he explained. With an appetite suppressant, it would be easier for you to diet, but not impossible to eat. Dr. Berlin pointed out that many of his patients with approved sex partners are able to continue functioning sexually without the temptation to act out in harmful ways.
I bet that depends on the dose, though.
Yeah. No doubt.
I mean, I'm sure Mike Ross was taking a dose to where he had little to no sexual desire. I'm sure.
Exactly. He describes his experience on these drugs in a minute, and it's like the more he took, it got to the point where he could just go without masturbation. He didn't think about sex at all, and that's the way he wanted it. So this doctor continues his talk about it. When the sex drive is diminished, a sexual sadist can control his behavior. Even if he has the thoughts about abnormal behavior, it no longer overpowers him. The effectiveness of hormone-suppressing drugs drove California, Florida, Georgia, and a growing number of other states to enact or consider mandatory chemical castration for sex offenders. No hormone treatment, no parole. I'm about that. I'm totally with that. If you're convicted sex offender, if you're a convicted pedophile, I am totally about that, man. You don't get parole unless you were put on this shit and you stay on this shit.
I agree, dude. And like I've said a million times, if it's tied to your sex drive, if it's tied to what gets you off, it's not going to change. It's not going to stop.
No.
Not going to stop.
Depo-Provera, the most commonly used drug in this type of treatment, is marketed as a female contraceptive because it blocks ovulation. When one is sexually aroused, the brain secretes endorphins, opiate-like substances that are biochemical stimulants of pleasure. Dr. Berlin speculated that in men, Depo-Provera blocks opiate receptors, thereby preventing the endorphins from having their normal pleasure-producing effect, but no studies have been done to prove or disprove that theory. Now, that may have changed because this book that I'm getting a lot of this from is older. I didn't have the time to look further into more studies about Depo-Provera and its uses currently, but what we can talk about is Michael's experiences on it. After Michael was placed on death row, Dr. Berlin again suggested that he try Depo-Provera because of the success that he had with his treatment at Johns Hopkins Clinic. By this point, Michael was still reluctant but also desperate. During the few months, he didn't notice any effects, so the dosage would increase twice until it got to 700 milligrams per week. Michael said that shortly thereafter, quote, I noticed a decrease in my need for masturbation and less desire to engage in sexual fantasizing. He said the changes were gradual, but at some point after receiving 700 milligrams per week, the incessant urges to masturbate began to subside. As his need to masturbate declined, so did the violent sexual fantasies in his head. By the time his testosterone levels dropped below 50, he masturbated only once a day. Below 35, he could abstain for a couple of weeks, and at 20 or less, he reported that he had, quote, essentially no sexual urges at all and did not masturbate at all.
But I wonder how long that would last, even at that high dosage. Because with every other medication, your body becomes accustomed to it.
Exactly.
That dosage is not enough.
Yeah.
And I think he knew that was inevitable.
Yeah. He said, quote, it cleared my mind and allowed me to be quiet, he explained. Before the Depo-Provera, I had always be actively doing something or mentally or obsessive sexual fantasies would pop up. What Depo-Provera did was greatly lessen the control the monster had over me. It didn't take so much effort to force the fantasies out of my mind. I could fight the compulsive urge, yet still be able to go to sleep. I was in control. He, quote, the monster, was still in my mind, but banished to the back. Michael's whole world changed. He said for the first time in years, he could watch a movie without fantasizing about raping and murdering one of the female actresses. Quote, I could just lie there and do nothing and let my mind wander without drifting into some sexual murder fantasy. I developed extensive non-sexual fantasy worlds where I could escape for hours on end and not have guilt to deal with afterwards. Fascinating.
Yeah, he talked about that, how he would just put his headphones on and listen to music and just meditate.
Right.
just lay on his bed for hours and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Do you ever think about that? Like, how necessary is sex drive within us? I mean, I know it's something that to do with evolution, and like we wouldn't all be here without it. That sex drive that drives us together and whatnot. But it's also can be, depending on probably your testosterone levels as a man, it can be overwhelming. Like, what was that movie? I think it was called Don John with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where he's like a young dude who's got a family and faith and all that stuff, but then he's also got this like underlying porn addiction. He can't wait to get home to log on to Pornhub, and it makes you wonder, like, if you could turn that down 90% of the time, you would want to, right? Like, it's just more of a distraction, a nuisance than anything 90% of the time.
I think if it gets to that point, yes. I think it can be a motivator for some men if it's used correctly. That kind of energy, if you can focus it, it can be a real motivator. But I think, at that point, I think it's too much. It's out of control. Yeah.
Well, he found this Depo-Provera to be very helpful to quiet the noise in his head and then help him focus on more productive things and get rid of the violent tendencies.
Right.
And during the next 18 years that he spent on death row, Ross met Susan Powers from Oklahoma, and the two were engaged to be married. She ended the relationship in 2003, but continued to visit Ross up until his execution. He became, yet again, a devout Catholic while in prison and would pray the rosary daily. Of course.
Why not?
And he was also accomplished at translating Braille and helping troubled inmates. So
I thought the Braille thing was interesting.
Right? That's kind of cool. He was transcribing Braille or whatever to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
In the final year of his life, Ross, who had always been opposed to the death penalty, said he no longer objected to his own execution. According to Cornell graduate Catherine Yeager, Ross believed that he had been, quote, forgiven by God and that he would be going to a, quote, better place once he was executed. She also said that Ross did not wish for the victims' families to suffer any more pain. Now, the book went into, his mentality behind that, and ultimately, he admitted to the author of this book that this was state-assisted suicide, that, he put out there in the world that he was doing this for the good of the families. But we talked about how he viewed those victims as faceless people, like they were just fulfilling his fantasies. He didn't care.
The only reason he knew what they even looked like was because of the newspaper articles and the pictures that were posted of them. He had no recollection. He couldn't pick them out of a lineup 12 minutes, 20 minutes later.
Yeah, and so for him, for us to believe that he cares so much about putting the families through more grief, I don't buy that. I think this was him saving face. He hated the world viewing him as this monster. He, like we said, his biggest fear was the image. This was actually keep him up at night. He would have nightmares about this, about him being executed and hordes of people outside the prison celebrating while he was being killed. He just hated the idea of that. And this was his way of saving face and also finally basically having the courage to commit suicide without actually having the courage to do it, being forced to do it, you know what I mean? And then ending he didn't want to be on earth anymore. He did have some shame about who he was and what he'd become and all that stuff. And probably the reality probably sunk in more once he was on Depo-Provera and those urges went away, because it was just like, what the hell did I do? Now that I'm not feeling the same thing that I felt before, there's no motivation anymore to do that, but yet I know I did that.
That could have been torture in itself, just being like, shit, what if I'd have just had this? You mean I could have quieted all this quote unquote monster inside of me or whatever?
Yeah.
I could have quieted this and lived a normal life.
Yep. Maybe had he gone and gotten some help, who knows what could have been done? Maybe he could have been put on that treatment. That's my point, is like, if you have these dangerous, violent thoughts, you got to go tell somebody. You can't allow yourself to say, oh, I'll be fine. I won't act on it. Because look how many times he did that, where he did act on it. Then afterwards he said, okay, I'll never do that again. And then he did it again.
Even after he's already acted on it multiple times, he's still kidding himself, saying that it would never happen again.
Yep. So let's talk about his execution. He would end up being executed by lethal injection on May 13th, 2005 at 2:25 a.m. Kind of weird how they do it in the middle of the night, right? It almost says that they have like some shame to it.
Yeah, I know, right?
At Osborne Correctional Institution in Somers, Connecticut. His remains were buried at the Benedict Grange Cemetery in Reading, Connecticut. We always like to talk about the last meal and the last words and all that. His were as boring as it gets. He basically did not request a special last meal before facing his execution, thereby dining on the regular prison meal of the day, which was turkey a la king with rice, mixed vegetables, white bread, fruit, and a beverage.
That doesn't sound bad, really.
No, it doesn't sound terrible, right? I mean, it's
No.
prison food, so it's probably is the crappiest version of that you could imagine.
No, yeah, maybe.
When asked if he would make a last statement, he said, without opening his eyes, "No, thank you." Like I was even like courteous at the end, like, "No, thank you."
No, thank you. Kill me now. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. After the execution, Dr. Stuart Gracian, a psychiatrist who had argued that Ross was not competent to waive appeal, received a letter from Ross dated May 10th, 2005, which read, quote, "Check and mate, you never had a chance." So the person that was trying to get him to not be executed,
Yeah.
he insisted that he be executed, and he had to have some last words. He had to get the last word in there, and that was kind of interesting.
That's kind of interesting. That's more interesting than the no thank you for sure.
For sure.
So we'll call those his technical last words, right?
Exactly.
The last words.
Yeah.
Check and mate.
Yep.
Nice. So that's old Mike Ross, huh?
Michael Bruce Ross, one of the serial killer you never knew, and now you do. I'm sure
now you do.
90% of our audience has never heard of this guy, and there was
like-
plenty of things that were interesting about him.
He's like Bundy meets Kemper.
Yeah.
Kemper light, Bundy light, whatever you want to call it.
You know, one thing I did a little differently with this one, and the book helped a lot with that, was dive more into the victims. I feel like a lot of our past episodes, we just say the name, we say how they were killed, and that's it. Like
Yeah.
I like in this episode how we went, you know, each victim we really talked about who they were, had quotes from their family members. I think we should look into doing that more in future cases that give a little bit
agree.
more levity, a little bit more meaning to their killing, you know, to their unfortunate death. You know.
I agree, 100%. We always try to show, you know, compassion when dealing with the victim, but yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of times there is a little more information about the victim.
Yeah, you can find it, and there's no need to not put it in there. It should be in there.
That's right. To if nothing else, carry on their memory. Right.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so let's get into some. Oh my Gaia.
Oh my Gaia. Oh My Gaia is an innovative, all-natural deodorant, fragrance, and beard oil company specializing in paraben and aluminum-free products. Their innovative line of deodorants inhibit the growth of odor-causing bacteria while maintaining effectiveness. At Oh My Gaia, they use only all-natural, paraben, and aluminum-free organic ingredients. And guess what? You don't have to leave your quarantined house to get some. It can be shipped straight to you. And guys, there's tons of scents to choose from. There's vanilla, cherry almond, sandalwood, lavender, lemongrass, Egyptian musk, one of my favorites, I'm wearing it today, coconut, dreamsicle, leather, lumberjack, honeysuckle, fireside. And we have our very own scent through Oh My Gaia called True Crime Pine. And guys, you can get any of these scents for 15% off your first order with using the word creeper, CREEPER. Because you are a True Crime Guys listener. That's the word creeper for 15% off at ohmygaia.com or at shop_ohmygaia on Instagram. Now that's OHMYGAIA.com.
No better
Smell
time
great,
to
stay
support
in
a
your
small
house.
business like Oh My Gaia. Definitely
That's right.
help out small business and also help out our show by supporting Oh My Gaia. Been with us since the get-go, pretty much. An awesome sponsor
Yeah.
and awesome product, more importantly.
Absolutely. It's products that we use ourselves. My family
Yep.
uses it.
Oh, 100%. My whole family uses it too.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I want to thank the people that have gone and taken the time to write and review our show on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever.
Awesome.
Since the last episode, we got Blaub74 in Canada. I'm not sure if I pronounced
Nice.
that right. BLOUB 74, Blaub.
Yeah.
Sullivan 4485 in the U.S. said we're the best out there. 5 stars. Thank you. Gray
very much.
11193 in the U.S. said one of my favorites. These guys are great. Thank you. Stevie 2X in Great Britain said listen to a few crime podcasts. These guys are the best. A bit of humor along the way makes it a great listen in good old England. So thank you, Stevie or Stevie 2X.
Thank you very much, Stevie.
Sweet Honey Z28 in the U.S. said love you guys. It's a male person, mail carrier.
Oh, okay. Nice. I'm
that's
sure they,
how it-
yeah.
Out there
We spend a
delivering
lot of
mail.
time with them. Yeah,
I wonder
I'm
if
sure.
you've delivered some of our stickers before, Sweet Honey, because I just sent out some gold stickers to everybody all over the world. So,
Oh, chances
Crazy.
are pretty good.
yep. Squally Girl in the U.S. said, great show. Thank you. Keep creeping. Maraba in the U.S. said 5 stars. Let's see. Picante in the U.S. Great podcast, but where'd you guys go? We didn't record last week for for the freeloaders out there because we were busy doing a Patreon exclusive on the Tiger King, people.
On the Tiger fucking King.
Yeah. Are you not entertained?
Are you not? Yes. If you don't know, if you're new to the show, we put out 3 free episodes a month. And the 4th week every month is a Patreon exclusive episode that for the foreseeable future will never be released on the free platform. So there's always that extra content that's there.
And a lot of times we pick the biggest cases for Patreon. We've done usually the biggest heavy hitters like Gacy and Dahmer. Some of them we have put out there for you for the freeloaders, but there's so much on there, so many episodes if you haven't signed up for Patreon that you haven't heard, and so much to go on there and binge, and there's no better time right now being in quarantine. $2 a month gets you access to all of that. Patreon.com/truecrimeguys. So definitely go check that out. $2 and you'll get a whole lot of entertainment. And one last person to thank for the iTunes reviews is Stacia in Texas. Said, love the podcast. You guys get me through these long 12-hour night shifts. Appreciate the long episodes and the way you relay the information. So thank you, Stacia, whatever, in Texas.
Well, thank you. Either way.
Don't mess with Texas.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome, guys. We appreciate that very much. It's a great way to help the show. If you're unable to be a patron or you're unable to make a donation, truecrimeguys.com, which you can for stickers, then leaving a review is the absolute best way to help the show.
We're about to hit 1,500. By the time this is released, I think we'll be there. We're at 1,496 today, I think, when I checked. Pretty crazy. Pretty
iTunes
humbling.
Reviews?
Yep. On
That's
iTunes
awesome.
Reviews. Yeah.
That's awesome. And over 3 million downloads.
Yeah, and we had just noticed that today. Man. So we made a post when we hit 1 million a while back, and I hadn't checked. I'm not one of those people that just is obsessed with downloads or whatever. I feel like you just keep putting out a good product, and the people will come, and you can't just sit there and obsess over the numbers and whatnot and go crazy every time it's down or up. It's gonna, just keep putting a good product out there. Anyways, so I just happened to look today, and it was at 3 million. So we skipped 2 million. I don't even remember seeing that happen. And I was just like, dang, that's cool.
Hey man, Snowball's picking up speed, and that's huge. Thanks to a lot of you guys who are spreading the word, who are listening, telling your friends, sharing us on social media. We really appreciate that. Yeah. At True Crime Guys on all social media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and guys, if you will, check out our other show by True Crime 100%. Guys Productions called Strange and Unexplained. The first episode was just released this past Monday, and new episodes will be released on Mondays. So new True Crime Guys on Wednesdays, new Strange and Unexplained on Mondays.
So if you've wondered why we don't go into a lot of unsolved cases and whatnot, this will fill that craving you have for hearing Michael talk about an unsolved case or just some mysterious things that have happened. It may not even be a missing persons case, but it could be anything. Like you talked about eugenics, right, in your second episode.
That's right.
So it could be all over the place. And
that episode is available on the Strange and Unexplained Patreon right now. So you can do patreon.com/S&U podcast and sign up for that Patreon as well. There is the first episode on Aisha Degree was obviously released early there. There's also an episode on eugenics, which will be episode number 2. And then there's a short episode that I just put up yesterday, actually on Amber Hagerman, who was the girl who was kidnapped and killed, and because of her case came the Amber Alerts, which we still get today. Yeah, so I put up a short on there. It's a short case. It's unsolved as well, but it's definitely worth checking out. It's a very interesting case. I think it's a historical case that people should know about.
Yeah, and the main center point of this show, if you're wondering, is Michael, but also I am behind the scenes playing a role, and you may hear my voice on it from time to time, and you may hear my thoughts on these cases, and I have insight into the next one, and it is a damn interesting missing persons type of case, man. That is very
yes,
very
it is
intriguing.
A twisted, tangled web, indeed.
Yeah,
so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's about it for us. We'll see you next week for another free episode, and what else we got to say? Keep creeping.
Keep creeping, guys.
True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making murder. True crime guys, in the desert we like a mirage. It's okay if you clicked on us cause you thought we was True Crime Garage. Now we ain't mad at you, sit down, let us talk at you. I'm talking to the creeper army, we out here making better charming.